Hi there and welcome to another Photoshop tutorial. This is Steve, and in this video we're going to talk about how to do layer masks, what they are, how to use them, how to create them, and so on. So let's dive into an example and I'll show you how to do layer masks. So we're in an example here. We just have an image of this soccer ball sitting on a stone wall with a little background. Let me show you the basics of layer masks. The first thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to create a duplicate copy of the background layer so we're working non-destructively. Just going to click duplicate, click OK. Now I can work on this copy. I'll just hide that so you can see the results of what I do. Now the very basics of what a layer mask is it basically hides part of your image. So if you think about if you're painting and you want to not paint the window of your house, you're going to mask off the window with tape, right? So you're hiding that part so that if you spray paint on an entire wall, whatever part is masked off is not going to be affected. And that's the basic idea of a layer mask. So first let's talk about how to create a layer mask. There are a couple of ways to create a layer mask, and I'll start with the very basic one and then we can kind of move forward. The basic way to create a layer mask is to go down to your bottom right hand corner and hover over this little icon right here. And all you do is make sure you select it on the right layer and then you click on that. And what it does is it gives you this little white square basically. Well, that is the mask. And whatever's white is going to show through. And whatever is gray or black is going to mask or cover up part of the image. And the best way to demonstrate this is just for me to get a brush tool. I'm going to hit the B key on my keyboard, and I've got a nice big brush, and remember you can use the left and right square brackets to change the size of your brush, but I'm going to go with this nice big brush so I can easily show you what's going on. Now I'm selected on the mask, not on the image, right? If I'm on the image, then I'm going to actually brush with paint, right? But I don't want to do that. So I'll Control Z to undo my brushing, and I want to be selected on the mask. And you can tell you're selected on it by these little brackets around it. So now when I go hover over this, if I make sure that I have a dark color, right? If you need to reset these, you just click that and then switch them. So I have a dark colored brush. Now when I click and drag, notice that it's covering up those pixels. It's hiding the pixels that I'm covering or that I'm painting over. And then when I release the brush, you can see, if you look at the layer mask, actually let me make this bigger so you can see it. There we go. If you look at the layer mask, you can see the black part is where I brushed and I hid all of those pixels. And by the way, the brush, in this case, I'm not brushing on paint, I'm just using the brush as a tool to control the mask. And the cool thing is you can work back and forth with the brush. So I can hit the X key to switch these to get the white as the foreground color. And let's make the brush a little bit smaller. And I can start to refine back in here, and I can reintroduce pixels back in here. Or in other words, take away parts of the mask so that it's showing. And where this becomes interesting is layering images and things like that. So for example, what I can do is I can add a layer behind this. Let me click down here first. I'm going to go to my adjustment layers and go to a solid color. And I'm just going to select that. It's going to drop a layer in here with a color fill, and it doesn't really matter what color I pick. I'll just leave it on the default color, and I'll click OK. That's now put a layer behind it, and wherever I've masked off on this layer, you can now see the layer behind it, which is the blue layer. And again, if I go back to this mask and I mess with it, for instance, let's say I'm going to take some more away. Let's say I change the opacity of my brush so it's really light, so I'm barely making any difference. And I'm going to lightly brush around the edges here. Then I start to reveal more of the image in the foreground rather than masking it off and just having the background show through, right? And if I up the opacity, then I will, and you'll notice that this is starting to get tapered and feathered, right, with the grays now, because I'm brushing away at the mask, okay? So you can see what I'm doing here. And this is really just for the sake of an example. But you notice how when I have this hazy mask here, then some of that blue kind of shows through, right? And you could do this with all kinds of different images that you layer on top of each other. Now let's change gears, and I'm going to show you a probably more common or better way to create a layer mask, okay? I'm going to leave this background here, and I'm going to delete this mask. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm just going to drag it out. Make sure you're not clicking on the whole layer, and you'll see it move, right? Just clicking on the mask, and it's going to drag it out, and I'm going to delete it. And this is an important question. It's going to say apply mask to layer before removing. You do not want to say apply, because if I say apply, then it's going to make this mask basically permanent on that image, right? If you hit cancel, then it's going to say, no, I didn't want to delete that. So what you want to make sure you click is delete. And I click delete, and that layer mask goes away, and I'm back to my original image. Now I still have this fill layer, right, hiding behind there of blue, but you can't see it because I have my whole image and nothing's masked off. So let's do something really different now. Let's grab an elliptical marquee tool. And you could use a lasso tool or a quick selection tool. Just pick a selection tool that fits your image. I have a round image, so I'm going to use the elliptical marquee tool. I'm going to click here. I'm just going to make a selection, and then I'm going to create a mask out of the selection. You'll see what I mean. I left click, drag to get a nice big circle. Oh, and actually I should hit shift, and that'll make it a square, or excuse me, it'll make it a perfect circle, not an ellipse. So I hold the shift until I get it to about the right size, and then I'm going to press the space bar key, and that means I can move. I'm not stretching the circle anymore. I can move the circle wherever I want it to go, and I'm going to try and line it up nicely with the outside of this ball. And that's probably good. Release the mouse, release the keys, and I've got a selection on the ball. Again, right, you could use another tool for that, but that's a pretty good one for a nice round shape. Now that I have my selection, I'm going to create a mask using this selection. Now there are a couple of ways to do that. While this is selected, I can go over here and just click on the layer mask icon, and it creates a mask based on that ball, or excuse me, based on that selection. Now I'm sure you can already see the advantages of using a good selection. This is a much cleaner selection than our really gnarly brush tool was, right? And it's masked off the background here, and so now the blue is showing through from the layer below. Okay, real quick though, let me go Control Z, because I want to show you another way to create that same layer mask. While you're in one of the selection tools, you just have to be in one of the selection tools, you can right click and you're going to get a new menu here. And you're probably familiar with some of the things in here, like you can take this selection and make a new layer, etc. But what we're going to do is go to select and mask. And if I click on this, it's going to bring up a whole new window with properties for the mask, and you can do a lot of things like smoothing and feathering to shape your selection and shape your mask to perfect it. I'm not going to go into the details of that because that's for a much longer conversation, but the important part that you're going to use is right down here. It says output to, and so we have to decide where we want to output this selection to. And what we do is we click the drop down. And I'm sorry, I kind of misspoke. These tools are all for modifying your selection. This tool, however, allows you to select here, and you can choose where you output it to. And we are going to output it to a layer mask. So in other words, we're going to take this selection that we did with the elliptical marquee tool around the ball, and we're going to output it to a layer mask for that layer. And by the way, so you can still see, if I go like this, you can see the marching ants on there. So I select on layer mask and I just click OK. And it basically does exactly the same thing as what I did when I went and just clicked on the layer mask icon down here. It creates your layer mask there. Now again, like with the brush tool before, I can modify this using tools. So if I go back to my brush tool, and I'm going to make it really big using my right square bracket key, and if I reduce the opacity quite a bit and make sure that the brush is on white in the foreground, I can actually brush over this very lightly, right? And I see how it grays this. It changes it from black to gray. And now I've thinned the mask essentially. So I'm showing some of this. Let me change my tool so it's not so annoying. I'm showing a little bit of this background now, right? And of course I can go back to the brush tool, and if I wanted to do more of that and I wanted to reduce the opacity even more, or just go kind of incrementally to show more and more of the background, I could even just do some at the top. I could do a bunch at the top, so a lot of the top is showing through. You get the intensity of the top but not down here, or I could do the whole thing. But you can start to play with layering the mask and adding to and taking away from the mask to see how much of what's behind you is going to show through. Okay, so there's a ton more to learn about layer masks, obviously, but that should give you a good basic understanding of how to create a layer mask, and then you can get your tools out and start playing with it. The real trick is to make a good selection and then make your layer mask based on that and put something behind it, right? If I didn't have this behind it, then you would just be seeing the background. And what you're seeing here is basically a bunch of transparent pixels, right? But by putting something behind it, then it kind of gives you a ground to work off of and layer over, and you can create all kinds of really cool effects. So I hope that was helpful in getting you dialed in on the basics of a layer mask. If you found the video helpful, please like the video. You can subscribe to my channel to get more videos because I'm always publishing videos. And if you're a Photoshop beginner, you should check out my course in the description below. I've got a full Photoshop mastery course for beginners on Udemy, and I would love to see you in there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.